What's up, guys? This is Zach Kolar, strength and conditioning coach at RPP. Today we're going to look into understanding and utilizing the Proteus motion machine. It's a machine that we've had for about a year now. Within this PowerPoint, we're going to look at exactly what the Proteus motion is, why we use it, and we'll dive into a little bit about power and acceleration, and then obviously how we can apply it to the sport of baseball. Starting out with what the Proteus machine is, it's a highly advanced piece of equipment that now provides us the ability to measure power and acceleration in all planes. It does this through providing constant resistance through a full range of motion, whereas compared to a cable machine, you really only get resistance one way. And it's also, from an assessment standpoint, it's probably the most practical method when you're trying to assess rotational power and acceleration. While absolute strength is the glass that all other types of strengths sit in, once an athlete is able to lift at loads that we deem are strong enough, we can then shift their focus to something more specific and work on producing force faster.
Rotational power and acceleration is everything when it comes to training baseball players. This is simply because in both hitting mechanics and pitching mechanics, everything happens in such a small, fast amount of time. Using the Proteus is great for assessing what an athlete may need to focus on in their training. This could be increasing their power through strength speed, or it could be increasing their acceleration through speed strength. Another great benefit to the Proteus is that we can improve tissue quality through time under tension. This trains the deep fascia that provides thickness and strength to all the muscle fibers. It's important to understand the science behind what we're actually training when we are using the Proteus. If we look at the equations, we can see how acceleration has a direct correlation to force. If we keep the mass the same and there's an increase in acceleration, this means that there's an increase in force. This also means that there's an increase in overall power.
So this is our assessment that we take all of our athletes through. The split stance press and row can show potential asymmetries between their push or their pull. The D2 flexion extension looks at overall cuff strength. The normal trunk rotation can show us how an athlete produces force only in the concentric movement, whereas the plyo trunk rotation, we include a load, which can show us how they utilize their stretch shortening cycle. And then the plyo shot put is a full body movement that can show us how an athlete transfers energy from the ground up. Because Proteus is a relatively new machine, many of our athletes haven't been exposed to this type of resistance in combination with these specific movements. The learning curve is extremely important to note because it requires our athletes to develop new proprioceptive qualities while they're using the machine. So this is why we wait roughly 3 to 4 weeks to actually run our initial test. The reason we do that is just to create more accurate baselines. This not only enhances our programming during their training, but also to give us better numbers to compare after we retest our athletes. One of the most common flaws we see with our athletes when they use Proteus for the first time is their inability to actually use the ground properly and maintain a stable base. So the athlete on the right actually has a good stable base, nice and wide, using the ground properly as he's going through the exercise. Whereas the athlete on the left, you'll see him fall over, kind of rocking his feet left to right. This obviously is going to give us skewed numbers when we're actually running our initial test. So again, that's another reason why we wait those initial 3 to 4 weeks. So on the next slide, just to give you a visual of how drastically different the numbers can actually be, on July 29th, we ran an initial test, and then we retested that same athlete on August 10th, which is roughly 11 days. And you can see just how close the numbers actually came together and how much better they actually improved. And that's just over 10 days of using the machine. So if we take a look at some of the data that we've kept track of, these two graphs represent an average of 2 of our pro athletes that were here training with us throughout the winter. Both of them saw pretty good improvements in both the plyo trunk rotation and the trunk rotation. And we've actually had a tendency to see that majority of our athletes need to work on the force side of the power curve. And by using the Proteus trunk rotation, this allows us to accomplish that.
When looking at how training on the Proteus translates to the sport, we looked back into our motion capture data to see if there was any specific translations. As you can see, both of these athletes had increases in their trunk angular velocity. Athlete 1 had an increase of 4.5%, while athlete 2 had an increase of 3.7%. Looking at this data from a strength and conditioning standpoint justifies the training we've been having our guys do and shows us that we're setting up our guys with the best tools to succeed on the mound. Here are the 4 major takeaways from this presentation that can help your understanding of Proteus improve. First, understanding that it is the combination of both power and acceleration that creates a high velocity throw. Using the Proteus actually allows us to train each of these qualities in the rotational plane. One of the best methods for measuring power and acceleration in the transverse plane is actually using the Proteus assessment. This allows us to actually pinpoint training adaptations on both sides of the power curve an athlete may need. One of the more important things that we found is that giving the athlete that 3 to 4 week window will actually help increase their proprioception to the Proteus and should give better results either in the initial assessment or in their reassessment. The last take-home point is that we have found that utilizing the Proteus in our training has shown to help increase trunk angular velocity in our motion capture data, and this is just one of the many factors that can influence velocity on the mound.